just want to give us your assessment first of all, Josie.
Yeah, disappointing result, obviously, really disappointing. I think in sport we've seen so many times, haven't we, when there's a bit of a disturbance, like a coach leaving, sometimes we get a bit of a response, and I've heard people talking about that this week, but my job, or I felt like us as a staff, what we really wanted to do is get a bit of an instant response. That's exactly what we wanted from players. Through that we had to try and make them happy, air a few grievances and fix what we could up in a short space of time. Pick the lowest hanging fruit and get the easy wins. And that makes me feel uncomfortable just in the phrase, because wins don't come easily. So that's a rubbish phrase, isn't it? Easy wins, but it was Challenge Cup and there's no second chances. So we had to throw everything at that. But listen, undeniably, the underlying problems are going to take a while to solve. They're going to take a while to solve. There's some habitual problems in there, some cultural ones, and just some people who haven't been put under the blowtorch enough, the heat enough to be able to perform to a level where they're comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm going to keep using that phrase. You've got to be able to do it physically. When it gets tough, if you're going to be ill-disciplined and you're going to give penalties away and you're going to keep getting put in the sin bin, then you've got to be mentally and physically tough enough and resilient enough to be able to defend it out, and we're just not there yet. And that physiologically, mentally, that'll take a few weeks to fix up.
How did you find the whole experience of being in charge today?
First time I've felt as alive as this probably for about 5 years. This is better, and life sometimes, as human beings, we only take the path of least resistance, so we always go towards what makes us feel good. In my experience, in my journey, I've talked about this loads of times, the most fruitful moments come at the end of some real adverse and painful experiences. And I've been through a few painful experiences. I'll tell you what I told the players. When I retired, it was like a river that had been dammed, or a canal had been dammed up. And if you imagine all the water being the spiritual personality side of me, it all drained down. But it was a good thing at the time, because I was able to clean out all the rusty bikes and the shopping trolleys and all the stuff that was on the bottom of the river that wasn't useful or congruent to where I needed to go. It wasn't a part of who I am anymore. So I've cleaned that up, and then this week it felt like the water's come rushing back. And the spiritual side of me, the information, the stories, the narrative, the connection with players has been phenomenal, and I truly felt alive. And I sometimes say to people, when you're 100 metres off the summit of Everest, you're going to feel terrible, and sometimes in life you feel horrendous physically and mentally, but that doesn't mean you're not far away from achieving something special. And listen, I don't find myself in this position through merit. I find myself in this position through circumstance, but I've said all week, my faith tells me that providence plays a part as well. So to answer your question, I've really enjoyed this week, and despite the result, I love the connection that I've got with the players, and I believe that if we keep moving forward together, we will get somewhere.
The Dwyer sin bin was obviously quite pivotal. Have you had a chance to look at it?
Yeah, he's reached out. Poor tackle technique from Brad, just lunging, diving, and again, that's just a discipline issue. I'm not going to blame anybody else other than the fact that I've got to hold my hand up, we've got to hold our hands up as coaching staff. We've got to put him in an environment where he has better footwork going into tackles, and he's not lunging and diving around and colliding with people like Kenny Edwards, and where you don't know what's going to happen, come out the back of it. So he's just got to be better.
What about positives? Can you point to any today?
Yeah, certainly. I thought our yardage D, when we were getting off the line, we drove them back. We showed a little bit of intent there. Thought we tightened up. In the past, I know there's been a lot of fear of lads bouncing off, ricocheting, missing tackles. Yeah, I've got to get rid of that mental block that some of them have got, and just get them to trust each other a little bit. It's great to see lads like Liam Tyndall get a bit more experience. I think physically he's got so much potential. It reminds me of a young Ryan Hall when he was coming through sort of 07, 08, but he's got so much rugby that he needs to play to learn how to be a really comprehensive winger. I thought second half, we talked about getting Cass in an energy battle. I think we were probably slightly better in that second half, energy-wise. But we just give too much up in that first half, and look, some of the decisions, and I'll be leaning on Longy as well this week, working really hard on our offensive side. There was far too many near interceptions in there, out in your mouth stuff, one of which we ended up conceding a try. So it's this balance between finding the basics and getting everybody to just play strong, lift the intensity, which we didn't do enough, and finding the skill level as well and the decision making.
Just lastly for me, Jonesy, you said going into this you were holding the baby.
Yeah.
Have you been given any further indication since Monday as to how long that might be for?
No, I've no idea. No idea. I'll just keep running my best and just keep going. JD, I'll just persevere, mate. That's what I always do. I'll just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and inevitably, in some dark moments, you get somewhere. I decided I wanted to run 40 10Ks on bounce for Lent. There was something a little bit different, and I'm on number 22 at minute. And 5:15 in the morning, sometimes it's cold, it's icy, and it's dark. Thinking, what are you doing this for? What possible good can come from it? But I found when you're just relentless. Eddie has got a great book called Relentless. Ultimately, you find yourself punching your way through walls in the end and finding some gold. So, listen, I keep running. I'll keep going until somebody tells me otherwise. That being said, if the right person comes along and somebody who can get it there quicker, I'll welcome them in with both hands because I'm a Leeds fan at heart.
Good man.
Jamie, you mentioned there that there's underlying problems there that are going to take a while to solve. Are these problems that have been around for a while?
I don't know. Listen, my beliefs on leadership come from a multitude of places. Some from other coaches in other sports, some from business leaders, some from reading a lot of books. But the vast majority, when it comes to rugby league, comes from people like obviously Tony Smith, Brian McLennan, Brian McDermott, wonderful leaders and coaches in their own right. And I guess I'm trying to put together a mosaic of what I think's beneficial for these boys. The interesting thing is though that it is literally a jigsaw because not everybody responds in the same way to different stimulus. And I've never seen some of these boys under certain stimulus under different environments. So I don't know how they behave, I don't know how they respond. I've ultimately had no choice in what players are there. We've got what we've got, and I think we've got a lot of talent, we've got a lot of ability. We write it down on paper. Wow, we've got a decent side. We started off this season with big smiles on our faces when we looked at the potential. But this many weeks in, you sort of look at where we're at and their confidence, and there's a backlog where you've got to go backwards and almost start again, as in like having a short pre-season and get these boys up to speed. So to answer your question, I've got to throw that torch or blow a torch on them in the short term and see how they respond. The only saving grace I think now is we've been knocked out of the Challenge Cup is that we've got a few weeks coming up where we're not going to have games to play, and that'll give us some time to invest physically into these boys and getting them in a place where they need to be.
You mentioned about the underlying problems. What are the underlying problems in your?
Or just an ability to work when you're tired, and an inability to make a tackle without lunging and diving on somebody's feet, an inability to put in enough kicks. Everybody makes errors. I always say don't search for perfection, search for application. Be as good as you can be. We're human beings, we're never going to be perfect. But we're putting in far too many 7 tackle restarts, far too many 6 agains, and just the methodical process of people working together, communicating together, and respecting each other, respecting the ball. There's lots of little bits of that, and it can sound like, that's really messy. You've just got to have the steel to be able to turn it around, and we're just not there yet. And it's because we've tried to train, I think we've tried to play and train in the sunshine, when everything's rosy, everything's clean and tidy and calm and collected and nobody's tired. But rugby league is chaos, and it's about managing chaos. Right? You can't make a pretty car crash. Life is chaos, and you've just got to learn how to deal with it. We're not able to deal with that chaos at the minute.
Is that the same for the habitual and cultural issues as well? They're the same things, or are they slightly different to the underlying ones, Joe?
Habits and culture creates consistency. So from week to week, you revolve around your game day, understand exactly what you're doing the day after that. There has been some environmental issues in that, obviously, because of COVID that everybody's been through. Our training ground has had issues with floods in recent years and had some redevelopment. So you've got to move around. You've got to try and get on pitches. We've just had a load of flood barriers put down at Kirkstall, which means our grass pitches are being out of view. So we've had to obviously come to Wednesday, try to respect that, look at that, and go up to Wheatwood and different places. And these aren't excuses, but fundamentally, in my opinion, to create great habits, you need a level of consistency so that things that you have to otherwise worry about or think about, you don't need to. When it's all flowing really well, all those things you don't need to think about. It's just there. So then you can invest all your energy into the little detail, which is just what we're not doing. We're not getting the detail. And within that, mate, you know, we're in a world of modern science where welfare says you can only do so much with players in a week. You can only do so much with them in a day. They're only allowed to travel so far. They're only allowed so many collisions, which means that every single piece of detail that you do, you've got to do it as good as you can. You've got to put your best version out there. And no, listen, the lads who aren't doing that haven't been sanctioned enough for me, and that's where we've got to be able to sanction. We've got to start laying down a little bit of discipline. Honeymoon period's done now. We've tried to get them smiling. We're out Challenge Cup. We've got rest at season, and so we've just got to start putting the heat on and see how they perform.
So there needs to be more pressure put on the players,
Yeah.
more accountability.
Accountability, pressure, and that isn't some sort of tyranny either. That's got to come from them. In fact, you know, one of the things I'm trying to do is get them to show a bit more gratitude for each other, talk to each other, remind each other of what our habits need to look like. But actually, tell your mate when he's done something really good. You know, when he's done something well, that carrot is a big motivator. I think it's scientific fact. You know, I'm no psychologist, but the carrot and stick work best together. You can't go too much with one or other. But certainly accountability and accountability from within players is really important. Well, I make no apologies for referring back to my days, my cohort, my group. You know, me and Kev Sinfield have been best mates forever, and I love him to bits. But we had this personal relationship and a professional one. And when I didn't do my job, as close as we were, the fact that he was there, my best man at my wedding, if I didn't do my job on pitch, he was ruthless. He'd savage it and he'd tell you. And he didn't do it because he didn't like me. He did it because he was preserving the environment. And that's the way it's got to go. And at the same time, I understood why he was being like that. So I didn't stick up my chest and go, right, let's have it then. I accepted what he had to say because I understood why he was doing it. And nobody wanted it to be positive more than me because I'm a Leeds fan. I'm 9 years old, who's standing in them stands, bawling my eyes out when Dougie Lawton got it wrong. Do you know? And Ellery Hanley and Scully and all them went quite up to mustard, and Scully's into me now. He's flipping it the other way around. He tells me what he thinks. But listen, I ain't losing heart. I ain't losing faith. And I'll look back on this period and I'll say to myself one day, you know, it was good that he kept going. And as long as I can keep looking in my mirror and saying, the guy inside the mirror, and I feel that he's giving his all, then I can sleep at night.
I guess the obvious question to ask off the back of that is, you talk about Kevin Sinfield being the great leader and willing to make, you know, hold people accountable.
Yeah.
Everyone knows how good a captain and leader he was. How do you replace that? It's not easy to replace those sort of characteristics and traits in a squad, is it?
No. Well, the consistency, the common denominator was always Kev, regardless of what coach that we had. And listen, we talk about him like he's some messianic figure sometimes. You know, he's a human being, end of the day. And how do you create a new Kevin Sinfield? Like, I don't know. Nurture. His son's here. I see his son walking around Jack now, and he's like almost a carbon copy in his image. And maybe it's going to be somebody like him that comes through and becomes that next leader. Because he cares that much about club, he cares that much about his identity, he cares that much about his teammates. I don't know the intrinsic philosophical reasons why people behave the way they do. There's far too many variables. But ultimately what I found is that the environment weeds people out in the end if they don't stand up to those cultural values. But somebody needs to drive them, somebody needs to hold them, somebody needs to understand them. And we're just not there. We're just not there with it. But it takes time. And listen, I'll say this as well, top players, we come through, what, late 90s, 99, 2000, 2001. It's 2004 before we won out significant and went on a run. You know, it took time took time, and we've never got over that transitional period, have we, since that group finished off and disappeared. So, listen, I'm pouring it out because I'm quite emotional, but yeah, I'm you know, to answer JD again, I'm up for a fight, mate. I'm keen to keep working with boys. We've got a great relationship, had a good chat in there, and we'll be working hard next time we're together.
You mentioned about that blow touch and turning up the heat on various ways. How do you do that?
You break it right down, make it really simple. Go right back to the basics. You know, I think about Tony Smith, some of the stuff that he did with us was like what he'd do with under nines. And sport is simple, you know, the basics, and the people that do the basics really well again and again and again usually get the results. You know, when we want to be experts or something, what we tend to do is go buy a book or that's written by the guy or the man or the woman who's the best at it. Right, so I don't know, you want to learn about finance, or go buy a book written by Warren Buffett or a book about him. But they're outliers, they're exceptional people. Do you know what I mean? They are like the Kevin Sinfields. What you need to do is probably buy a book of somebody that's distinctly average but can do it again and again and again, because the things we've got to do the most of in life are the average things. Until you can do them really well, until you can do the basics well enough, again and again and again, under the heat of pressure, in that smelting pot, I've talked about this loads of time, that refiner's fire, then you know, in games like that, you'll never come through when you're giving too many penalties away and having to defend too many sets. But I'll say this, you know, we're in a bit of a hole, and I said it to Tanya, we can either stay in the hole and get buried alive and stay down there, or we can start building a foundation. And you know, every skyscraper, every big building has got some deep foundations, and I honestly believe that when we get refined and built back up, when we come out of it having been in that hole, we can be so much bigger and taller for it. And that's my hope for this group. That's my hope for lads like Cam Smith, Ash Hanley, Harry Newman, Nikolai Ledsky, some of those young homegrown boys are going through it. In the years to come, I'm hoping they'll reflect back on this period and say, yeah, we needed that. It made us better people. It galvanised us into better teammates. And we, you know, now, as much as it hurt, we reflect on it as a positive experience.